Jai Guru Maharaj. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. So today we wanted to discuss the pastimes of Gaura Kishora Das Babaji. He's situated next to Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur because he is his instructing spiritual master. Oh no, he's his Dikshit spiritual master. So this is an interesting picture of Gaura Kishora Das Babaji. He was in 1849, he left Grihastha life after the death of his wife. And previous to that, he was known as Vamsi Das. At that time, he was maintaining his life by farming corn in this way, doing honest work and living a regulated life according to the principles of the scriptures, along with his chaste and humble wife. He then moved to Vrindavan and took initiation from Sri Bhagavat Das Babaji, a disciple of the topmost Vaishnav Sri Jagannath Das Babaji. He accepted the dress of one in a renounced order of life, thus became a Babaji. Usually Babaji means that they won't do any preaching, or they'll just be engaged in bhajans to elevate themselves. For over 30 years, Gaura Kishora Das Babaji stayed in Vrindavan performing bhajan under the tree of Giri Govardhan, Nandagram, trees at Giri Govardhan, Nandagram, Varsana, Radhakund, Suryakund, and Raval and Gokul. So they would be extremely renounced. Sitting in seclusion, he chanted 2 lakhs Hare Krishna Mahamantra every day, 128 rounds. He felt painful separation from Radha Govindji and cried profusely. As he wandered through the Dwadash, the 4 forests of Braj, he would loudly chant the holy names in a deep voice or full of lamentation. Gaura Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj, his mood of renunciation was unparalleled. He took Madhukari from the Brajbasis. So Madhukari is Babaji's daily practice of begging a little food from 1 up to 7 houses, just as a bee collects a drop of honey from each flower. So usually the Brajbasis, they would keep some roti and sabji or something for these Babajis and give them as their donation. He saw all the Brajbasis, residents of Vrindavan, as being the direct personal associates of Radha and Krishna. As a result of his vision, he would pay respects to every person, cow, animal, bird, tree, creeper, insect, ant in the holy dham. While staying in Varsana, he made a flower garland every day for Radha and Krishna. After 30 years of rendering intimate service to Radha and Krishna in Vrindavan, Babaji Maharaj, he felt inspired by the divine couple to see Navadvip Dham. He visited all the life stands of Lord Gauranga in Gaura Mandal. In Navadvip, he used to sing one bhajan. By receiving Nitai's mercy, one gets Gauranga's mercy, which makes one eligible for Krishna Prem. With Prema Bhakti, one can attain the service of Srimati Radharani and the gopis. So we need Nityananda's mercy to get Gauranga's mercy, to get Radha and Krishna's seva. Gaura Kishora Das Babaji was the embodied form of Rupa Raghunath's renunciation. He was completely detached. He would wash discarded cloth to cover his body. He would wear discarded cloth to cover his body. He drank from a rejected clay pot. Parched rice mixed with Ganga water, or simply some mud from the Ganga banks sustained his life. He was so renounced. On Ekadashi, he didn't eat or drink a drop of water. He carried 2 books written by Narottam Das Thakur, and that's Pratana and Prema Bhakti Chandrika. Regularly, he is associated with and heard Srimad Bhagavatam from Bhaktivinoda Thakur. So it's regarded that Bhaktivinoda Thakur is his instructing guru, spiritual master. In Swananda, Sukunda Kunj in Gadrum Dweep, Gaura Kishora Das Babaji was a Shiksha Guru, the Shiksha disciple, an intimate friend of Bhaktivinoda Thakur. Constantly absorbed in bhajan, Babaji Maharaj had no desire to make disciples. On the request of Bhaktivinoda Thakur, however, he reconsidered. Upon seeing the true humility and deep attachment of Bhaktivinoda Thakur's son, that's now known as Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Kishora Das Babaji accepted one disciple, Sri Vishabhanu Panavi Daita Das, and that's famously known as Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, Srila Prabhupada. The Thakur arranged a bhajan kutir for him on the same property as Bhaktivinoda's own house in Godum Dweep. When the time came for Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur to take Diksha, Bhaktivinoda Thakur advised him to approach Kishora Das Babaji. Bhaktivinoda Thakur was the father of Bhakti Siddhanta and his first instructor in spiritual science. But the etiquette was that one should not take Diksha from one's biological father. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur sent him to Kishora Das Babaji. Now, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, he was very learned scholar, right? He learned astrology, he learned so many different things. By the age of 7, he had memorized the Bhagavad Gita and could even explain its verses. He had a photographic memory. In school, he read all the books in the entire library. And by just reading them once, he could remember every word. And so the library purchased more books just for him. By the age of 25, he had written numerous articles and published a book, Surya Siddhanta, for which he was awarded the title Siddhanta Saraswati. So he was highly educated and literate, whereas Kishora Das Babaji was hardly educated or literate at all. He was a farmer. The first time Siddhanta Saraswati approached Kishora Das Babaji, the Babaji refused to accept him. He didn't directly say no, but he said, I will ask Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. And when Siddhanta Saraswati approached him again, he approached his father to tell him that this is what's happening. So Bhaktivinoda Thakur encouraged him to persevere. You must go back and beg with all humility and earnestness for him to accept you. And I think he even said, don't come back home unless he has accepted you. So Bhakti Siddhanta, he went back and he asked Kishora Das Babaji, who again refused. Oh, I forgot to ask Mahaprabhu. I am so sorry. So again, when Bhaktivinoda Thakur returned, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur returned, his father was upset. He knew Kishora Das Babaji was a pure devotee. So he urged Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati to persist. He again instructed him. And he added also, if you fail this time, don't bother to come home. Siddhanta Saraswati left home, went to the Ganga. He felt so hopeless. He thought he might as well just drown himself in the river. Just then, Kishora Das Babaji appeared. He knew what was in his future disciple's heart. Siddhanta Saraswati just threw himself at the lotus feet of Kishora Das Babaji in abject humility and complete surrender. Finally, Kishora Das Babaji accepted him. Siddhanta Saraswati had shown that he was free from any tinge of false pride, even though he was so learned and literate, and his guru was uneducated. From a material point of view, of course, Srila Prabhupada remarked that Kishora Das Babaji was illiterate and could not even sign his name. Yet he became the spiritual master of Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur, the best scholar of his time. Although Kishora Das Babaji was hardly educated or literate, learned scholars and public servants would approach him with their questions on Srimad Bhagavatam and other scriptures. And with his realized knowledge, he would answer their questions to their full satisfaction. Sometimes devotees would read various scriptures for him, and he would comment on them from his deep spiritual realizations. To keep mundane people from approaching him for material boons, he once resided in the lavatories at Kuliya Dharamshala. in Koladwip for 6 months. When public officials came offering him to build him a proper bhajan kutir, Babaji Maharaj locked himself inside, and he said he'd already had one. He believed that associating with materialists was much worse than the smell of stool in the latrine. So this is renunciation. Kishora Das Babaji advised a Calcutta doctor who wanted to open a free health clinic in Navadvip Dham. If you want to live in Navadvip Dham, then give up your desire to run a free clinic for healing sense enjoyers. If you want to render substantial service, then renounce everything except what promotes Hari Bhajan. All other kinds of duties and services simply bind one to the ghastly cycle of karmic reactions. Babaji Maharaj spoke gravely to a newly married man. So his preaching was really cut right through all the rubbish. It get to the core. Okay, a Vaishnava wife is extremely rare and difficult to find in this world. If one has the good fortune of having one, he should see it as a benediction from Krishna. The wife worships the husband as her Lord and Master. Similarly, the husband should worship the wife because she is Krishna Dasi, a servant of Krishna. In this way, the husband can protect his devotional enthusiasm by not considering his wife to be his maidservant, but she is always the maidservant of Krishna. This is amazing advice. How difficult it was to get the service of Babaji Maharaj is illustrated by the following example. Once, the Maharaj of Keshi Bazaar, Manindra Chandra Nandi Bahudar, sent someone to fetch Babaji Maharaj to his royal palace. At that time, Babaji Maharaj said, if I were to go to the king's palace, the desire for riches would arise within me. So in the king's company, mutual ill feelings would develop between me and the king. If the king wants to be my friend, tell the king to leave behind all his material opulence and objects of his enjoyment and come here where I am. He can live here with me, live just like I am doing. He can make a small covering out of straw, like that used for covering the boats used by the fishermen. There the two of us can live, the king and I, and together we can worship Hari in great ecstasy. Of course, that's never going to happen. One who wants bhojan, eating palatably, will spoil his bhajan. Bhajan was a favorite quote of Babaji Maharaj. In other words, eating here and there simply to gratify the tongue, bhojan, destroys any attempt to worship Krishna. Bhajan. So this is important because sometimes we like to taste different foodstuffs and we can eat here, we can eat in that restaurant. Actually, it's not a good thing. Why? Because we inherit the consciousness of the cooks, and we don't know what the cooks are like, what they are doing in their personal lives. So in order to avoid that consciousness, best to eat at known places, at a home, cook for yourself, ideally. Once a devotee ate some festival prashadam in his bhajan kutir. Babaji Maharaj would not speak to him for 3 days. On the 4th day, he said, you accepted festival prashad given by low-class Harriets and beautiful women. Because you took food without considering its origin, your bhajan is useless. So even taking prashad, you have to be careful. This is really quite challenging instructions. But we have to be very careful. If we're trying to enjoy food because it's tasty and opulent, we're on a downward cycle. Once on an anniversary of disappearance of Sanatana Goswami, Babaji Maharaj, he said, this afternoon we shall have a great feast, a mahotsav, for this holy day marks the passing of Sanatana Goswami. So his servant who was nearby heard him and asked, where are you going to get the things we need for a festival? Because they didn't have anything. Right? Babaji Maharaj explained, we have no need of anything. We may fast and chant the holy name of Krishna. In a humble way, we shall enjoy a great festival. So festival doesn't necessarily mean feasting and having a big fast, a lot of food items to enjoy. It's a real festival is the holy name, the festival of the holy name. One day, a resident of Agartala named Sri Nirendra Kumar Sen came to visit Babaji Maharaj. He wanted to know his Siddha Pranali, the path of perfection. This is where the spiritual master tells you, this is what you are in the spiritual world. So Babaji Maharaj told him, you cannot know Bhagwan through your fanciful imagination. If you go on chanting the holy name, you will gradually realize the internal meaning of its syllables. The swarup of the holy name will manifest itself. The sadhika, at that time, he will also realize his own internal self. At that time also, the sadhika will awaken to his particular divine service to Krishna, the service that will be dear to his heart upon attaining perfection. The essence of Gokishora Das Babaji's instructions were as follows. The divine name of Krishna offers one and only shelter. One should never try to remember Radha Damodar's transcendental pastimes by artificial means. Constant chanting of the divine name will purify the heart. By chanting Harinam, the syllable of Mahamantra, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Ram, Hare Ram, Ram Ram, Hare Hare, will gradually reveal the spiritual form, qualities, pastimes of Krishna. Then you will realize your eternal spiritual form service in the 11 particulars of your spiritual identity. So on November 19th, 1915, Srila Kishora Das Babaji Maharaj joined the eternal pastime of Gandharvika Giridhari. There was some dispute over what would happen to his body. His samadhi would, of course, become an important place of pilgrimage, and some of the heads of the local centers saw this as an opportunity to make money for their mats and even for their own sense enjoyment. At that time, Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, he ran to the site but when he arrived, some of the local Babajis objected. He is not a sannyasi. How can he give samadhi to such an exalted and renounced personality? So then Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati, he said, I am the only disciple of Babaji Maharaj. And although I have not accepted sannyas, I am a celibate brahmachari, not secretly addicted to abominable habits or involved with illicit activities. Who amongst you can say that in the last year he had no sex or illicit connection with a woman? Please step forward. Everyone was silent. Then he challenged, okay, if not in the last year, what about last 6 months? Everyone was silent again. Okay, what about for the last 3 months? Again, silence. How about the last month? Silence again. The last 3 days. Still, there was silence. So they had been exposed and humbled. Not one of the Babajis was fit to touch the transcendental form of Kishora Das Babaji. And one by one, they walked away. Even then, there remained some question about how to handle the body, which was lying on the ground. So out of humility, Kishora Das Babaji had instructed that when he departs, his body should be dragged through the streets of Navadvip so that it could be bathed in the dust from the feet of the Vaishnavas who had walked the holy ground of the Dham. So some of the townspeople were proposed to take the body and drag it through the streets of Navadvip, but Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati stopped them. Although we are fools and offenders, still we can try to understand the true meaning of Babaji Maharaj's humble request. After the departure of Thakur Haridas, Lord Chaitanya himself took the spiritually blissful body of the Thakur on his lap and danced. Following the divine example of Mahaprabhu, let us bear Babaji Maharaj's blissful body on our heads. So he stopped them from taking, because that's his humility. But actually the Vaishnava is treated with great honor. In Braj Leela, Gokishora Das Babaji serves Srimati Radharani as Guna Manjari, his beloved disciple. Srila Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur established his samadhi on the banks of Sri Chaitanya Mat Radhakund near Chaitanya's Yogpit in Mayapur. So this is a brief summary of Gaura Kishora Das Babaji. This is quite brief. There's a lot more, but that's all I've got. So he's a really exalted personality, very, very, very renounced. And although illiterate, very devoted to the Lord. And even though he was illiterate, he had a disciple who was exceptionally scholarly, as in Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur. So, are there any questions or any comments? Otherwise, we can continue with